The story begins with the Sanjo family, one of Japan's most powerful and prestigious clans. They are so influential that the chairman's granddaughter, Mika, is called a princess. She has recently turned 18, and today is her wedding day. However, even on her special day, her fiancé is currently away due to work. Moments later, news comes in that a former employee of the SRA group is causing trouble and attacking guests at the event. Seeing this, Mika doesn't flinch and bravely confronts the man. He is about to strike her when her fiancé, Cou, arrives with a sword and knocks down the man. She then gratefully hugs him, and all the guests cheer at the sight of their love. In a flashback, we learn that Cou comes from a very humble background. When Mika was 10 years old, she was almost kidnapped, but he stepped in and rescued her. At that moment, she developed immediate trust in him, and he has been her bodyguard ever since. Over time, he also earned the chairman's trust and began working as the sales division chief for their company. When Mika turned 18, she hoped to meet and fall in love with the man of her dreams. Unfortunately, her parents arranged a marriage with someone from another wealthy family. To avoid this, she approached her bodyguard, Cou, and proposed a fake marriage. She said it was fine for both of them to date others, and this marriage was only a formality. Despite initially refusing the idea, Cou eventually agreed to help her. In the present, the couple celebrates with a lavish wedding. Cou notices a small scratch on her face from the earlier incident and becomes mad. He tells her that no one can hurt the woman he loves, which surprises Mika. She tries to convince him that their marriage is fake and means nothing. However, he insists that as her husband, he is the one she will eventually fall in love with. Days later, the couple goes to collect their wedding rings at a jewelry store. There, they run into Cou's ex-girlfriend, Mayumi, who also happens to be the store owner. As the three of them chat, our heroine realizes that if Mayumi and Cou start dating, she will also be free to have an affair. With this in mind, she excuses herself and gives them some privacy. Moments later, as she secretly watches them, she sees Mayumi forcefully kissing Cou. Despite wanting it to happen, she feels sad for some reason. Later at home, an upset Mika tells Cou that he can be with Mayumi if he wants. However, he becomes angry and insists that she is the one he loves. She doesn't believe him, so he removes his ring and asks her to return it. Obligingly, Mika goes to the store and hands the ring to Mayumi. The latter apologizes for the sudden kiss and states that it means nothing. She also claims that Cou only cares about Mika, and it's visible in his eyes. Hearing this, Mika decides to keep the ring. A few days later, she receives a text from a male friend who wants to see her. When they meet, he abruptly confesses that he likes her and asks her out on a date. Mika is overjoyed that she's finally been asked out on a date and agrees without hesitation. That evening, the two go out to the movies and have a good time. While heading home, they cross paths with Cou, who is furious to see her with another man. He pulls her away and then scolds her for hanging out with another guy. He then tries to kiss her, but she reacts angrily and slaps him. Mika asserts that he has no right to interfere in her personal life. As they argue, a thunderstorm occurs, which scares her. She hides her anger and immediately embraces Cou. We then see a flashback to her childhood, which reveals that she's always been afraid of thunder. During those moments, she used to hold Cou's hand and find comfort in him. Days later, he injures his arm while trying to rescue Mika from an oncoming motorcycle. Due to this, her grandfather asks her to become Cou's secretary and assist him with his work. Although she's reluctant, she eventually agrees and shows up at his office. During this time, she sees his work up close for the first time and is genuinely impressed. One evening, as Cou returns home from work, she asks why he works so tirelessly without taking care of himself. He explains that he wants to be a man worthy of her because he is a nobody, while she is the princess of the Sanjo family. Hearing this, Mika recalls how, when she was a child, Cou worked so hard at everything that he barely had time for himself. This leads her to wonder if all his efforts were for her sake. Seeing her silent, he asks if she's fallen in love with him because of his dedication. Mika tries to deny it, but he grabs her face and kisses her. She tries to resist, but eventually gives in and kisses him back. Afterward, she finally admits that she's fallen in love with him, which makes him happy. However, she informs him that she wants him to be her first love and a learning experience. Mika plans to eventually find a soulmate and settle down with him. Hearing this, Cou is devastated as he wants her to wholeheartedly fall in love with him. Nevertheless, he feels he has no option but to agree to her proposal. The following day, Mika happily confides in her friends about her newfound love. However, they begin talking about how men need physical intimacy to sustain a relationship. This makes her very nervous, and she decides to avoid Cou for the time being. But that afternoon, while handing him coffee, she gets so nervous that she accidentally spills it on her legs. Seeing this, he immediately carries her to the bathroom and washes her feet in cold water. At that moment, it gets so close that our heroine almost has a heart attack out of nervousness. That night, when Cou gets home, she continues to avoid him and doesn't even look him in the eye when they talk. In the morning, she talks to Mayumi and admits that she used to think love was just for fun, but now she realizes it's more serious. Mayumi responds by whispering something in her ear. That night, Mika dresses seductively and waits in the room for Cou. She believes that he's holding back on intimacy and offers to spend their first night together. Cou doesn't waste any time and begins kissing her. However, he quickly senses her hesitation and realizes she's not ready, so he stops and says that her happiness matters more, and they can wait till she's more comfortable. Hearing this, she feels very relieved, and the couple falls asleep hugging each other. The next day, Mika gets her first paycheck and decides to take Cou on a date. The couple spends a beautiful day together and seem to be very happy. While they're kissing in the park, a man named Haruka stares at them from a distance and takes their picture. A few days later, while walking through the subway, Mika comes across her cousin, Amain, also known as the Prince of Sanjo. It turns out they haven't seen each other since he moved to Vienna with his parents. The two are overjoyed at the reunion, and Amain explains that he's here on vacation. When he asks to spend time with her, she ends up inviting him over to the house. Later, when Amain arrives at the house, he has an awkward meeting with Cou. Judging by their expressions, it's clear that the two guys aren't happy to see each other. It turns out Amain has had feelings for Mika since childhood, and he is unhappy that she's married to her bodyguard. He quickly realizes that the marriage is fake and suggests that Mika marry him instead. This obviously makes our hero jealous, so he grabs Mika and begins kissing her. But Amain senses their hesitation and figures out that they haven't gotten intimate yet, and that the kiss means nothing. The next day, Amain goes to the company and invites Mika out for a meal. When Cou gets mad, Amain says he got their grandfather's approval. Later, the two men speak privately, during which Amain brags about his high status and claims that no matter how hard Cou works, he will always be just a salaryman. He insists that he's a much better match for Mika and is determined to win her over. Later, Amain and Mika spend the day together, and when she returns home, Cou is waiting for her. He asks her if anything happened between them, but she says no and claims that she loves only him. With this assurance, our hero grabs her and starts kissing her passionately. However, she's not ready to proceed beyond that, so he respects her boundaries. The next day, Cou meets with Amain and explains that although he lacks money, status, and a pretty face like Amain, he is the one who protects Mika at all costs and is wholeheartedly willing to do so. Afterward, Amain goes to Mika and asks her about her feelings. He believes that Cou is only taking advantage of her, but she admits that she genuinely loves him and wants to be with him. After that moment, Cou appears and hugs her, making Amain very sad. Thus, the Prince of Sanjo accepts defeat and vows never to bother her again. In the following scene, the couple visits an orphanage where the Sanjo family donates money every year. While there, Cou explains that he himself is an orphan and grew up in this place from the ages of 12 to 18. Just then, Haruka appears and introduces himself as the managing director of the place. Cou gets angry to see him, and it appears that the two don't get along. Haruka tells Mika that he and Cou grew up together in this orphanage and that they're childhood friends. He then kisses her hand, prompting our hero to lead her away. On the way home, he warns her to stay away from Haruka and gives her a passionate kiss. The following day, Mika decides to accompany Cou on a business trip. Even though it's a work trip, the thought of spending the night with him on the road makes her heart flutter, so she carefully books accommodations at the inn under a false name. The business trip goes smoothly, and upon arriving at the inn, the couple is lavished with excessive hospitality. It turns out Amain has already informed them about the arrival of the princess, much to the couple's annoyance. That night, Mika and Cou lie back to back, and she asks him to touch her fingers. She then mentions that she finally wants more than just a kiss. Shocked, our hero tells her not to tease him, but she claims she's serious. Hearing this, he excitedly gets up and kisses her, after which the two make love for the first time. A few days later, Mika visits the orphanage alone and once again runs into Haruka. She tries to ignore him, but he entices her with childhood photos of Cou, and they end up having a conversation. Haruka appears to be a smart guy, and he wins her over with his impressive talk. But when he tries to kiss her hand again, Cou arrives and stops him. Our hero then warns Haruka to stay away from his wife before escorting her away. The next day, Mika shares with Mayumi how wonderful her husband has been treating her lately. This makes Mayumi jealous, as Cou never made her feel special. She then says that when she was dating him, he always worried about Mika and prioritized her. This is the reason why they broke up in the past. In the next scene, Cou holds a model call for their upcoming commercial. Suddenly, the chairman arrives and excitedly announces that he's discovered the perfect model. When the girl walks in, Cou is shocked and calls her Yuri, but the chairman corrects him, stating that her name is Ron. She then introduces herself and expresses gratitude for the opportunity to work with Sanjo Industries. However, Cou keeps staring at her with a shocked expression. She can't stop staring at them and suspects something is going on. After the meeting, Ron asks Cou if she looks like her sister. She then discloses that she's Jur's twin sister and that she was adopted as a child. Ron had heard a lot about C from her sister and decided to apply as the model when she saw his name in the commercial. After this, she congratulates the couple on their marriage and leaves. When they return home, Cou apologizes to Mick for not disclosing his relationship with Yuri. He explains that she was in the same orphanage as him and was 4 years older. When she asks if Yuri was his first love, he doesn't give a clear answer. Although Mick pretends to be calm, she gets very worried about his past and ends up crying alone. The next day, C meets with Ron and they talk a lot about Yuri. She later invites him to her room, where they begin drinking. During this, she abruptly asks if she looks like her sister, to which he says yes. She then tries to seduce him, claiming that her body is similar to her sister's. However, our hero stops her, saying that he remembers everything about Yuri until the day she died. He asserts that he is now with M and requests that she not do this to him again. In response, Ron starts crying and explains that she just wanted to remind him of her sister. Afterward, when Cou comes back to the office, Ma notices the scent of a woman's perfume on him. He directly tells her that he was with Ron in her hotel room. This makes her very upset, so she goes to her room and cries alone. That evening, when he returns home, she takes the initiative and starts kissing him, but he doesn't seem to be in the mood. The following morning, C brings Mick to a graveyard and reveals that this is where Yuri is buried. She passed away 14 years ago, and he finally feels ready to bid farewell to her and move on from the past. He tells her that Ron only came into his life because she didn't want him to forget about her sister. Hearing this, M becomes emotional and states that it's important to cherish the past. She tells him to hold on to Yuri's memory and assures him that she is willing to accept everything about him, including his past. Meanwhile, we see Haruka in his office staring at pictures of Kei and Mika. He states that he wants their bond to be strong so that they can have a child soon. At that moment, Ron arrives and he compliments her, saying that she looks beautiful like her sister. From their conversation, it seems like the two are plotting something together. A few days later, when Cou comes home from work, he is surprised by M, her parents, and her grandfather, who are there to celebrate his birthday. There is a plethora of food on the table, and everyone appears to be in a happy mood. Our hero is delighted by the gesture, but soon he becomes disturbed as memories of his childhood trauma start flashing through his mind. The next day, he's at a cafe by himself when Haruka suddenly shows up and sits with him. He tells Cou that he's doing a fantastic job of fooling the princess and that their plans are working. He then suggests that it's time to take control of Sanjo Ire, and shockingly, Cou agrees. Later that night, our hero is suddenly awakened by a traumatic nightmare from his childhood. In a flashback, we see a 12-year-old Cou in a state of fear as his drunken father subjects him to terrible violence and abuse. His mother was kind to him, but she was also a victim and couldn't protect her son. One day, she abruptly left because she couldn't take it anymore, and later his father disappeared too. Without any family left, Cou ended up living in an orphanage and becoming a part of the system. While in foster care, he met 17-year-old Haruka and Yuri, who welcomed him and took care of him. Despite their tough demeanor, they had a strong sense of justice and protected the other kids. One day, Cou noticed them beating up a teacher who had tried to inappropriately touch the kids. This impressed him a lot, and he started idolizing the two, forming a close bond. When Haruka turned 18, he found a job and eventually left the orphanage. Before leaving, he encouraged Juno to stay strong and take care of Yuri in his absence. Not long after that, a man and his wife arrived as the new directors of the orphanage, who happened to be members of the Sanjo family. Although on the surface the director appeared to be nice, he started taking advantage of the children. One night, while Cou was sleeping, the director entered his room and started caressing his face. The boy kinda knew what was going on, but didn't know how to react. Before things could escalate, Yuri arrived and started attacking the director, causing him to flee. Seeing the pattern, she realized she had to do something, so she offered herself, begging him not to touch the other children. As a result, Yuri fell pregnant with his child. She then spoke with the director's wife, who was well aware of his deviant behavior but said basically you can't go against the Sanjo group because they're so powerful. Instead, she asked Yuri to remain silent and offered support to terminate the pregnancy. To make things worse, the director was still violating children. So one evening, Yuri took him up on the roof and confronted him about his actions. This piece of garbage tried to justify himself by saying he provided food and shelter for these children, but she was having none of it. As their argument intensified, Cou arrived at the scene, but he was terrified of the director and couldn't stand against him. At that pivotal moment, Yuri decided she couldn't allow him to hurt her kids anymore, so she grabbed him and jumped off the roof. This resulted in both their deaths. In the aftermath, she became so traumatized that he began to blame himself for not being able to help her. After Yuri's death, the incident was covered up by the Sanjo family, who claimed it was an accident. So Haruka and Cou began plotting revenge. The former revealed that the Sanjo family had a granddaughter they referred to as Princess. He proposed that they go after her and gain their trust. When Cou was in high school, he came up with a kidnapping scam. Some guys would kidnap him, and he would step in to rescue her. The plan was successful, and he entered the Sanjo family as Mika's bodyguard. During this time, he noticed how she was raised with great care and love. He then recalled his childhood, which was full of hardship and pain. This made him realize that life is unfair, and that the rich are responsible for all the bad things that happened in the world. So he decided that when the time came, he would kill Mika and get revenge. In the present, Cou stares at him, who is sleeping peacefully. He puts his hand around her neck, but can't bring himself to hurt her. His mind is filled with happy moments they spent together, and this makes him very emotional. When he wakes up, she sees him crying uncomfortably, but doesn't ask the reason why. She simply comforts him and says she loves him a lot. The two then kiss and fall asleep holding each other. The following evening, Cou gets a call from Haruka, who says that their initial plan was to have him and his child inherit Sanjo's family's assets and then kill her. But since the baby isn't coming anytime soon, he suggests killing her right away. Although hesitant, Cou assures him that he will do it soon. Later, when he returns home, he doesn't find Mika around and becomes worried. He starts calling out her name, and she soon appears, saying that she went to the store. Our hero then tearfully hugs her and expresses his love for her. At that moment, he understands that he can't bring himself to hurt her even slightly. The next day, C meets with Haruka and confesses that he can't go through with their plan. He says he's willing to give his life to save Mika. However, Haruka gives him a gun, stating that he will have to kill him to stop the plan. At that moment, C reminisces about the time Haruka protected him. He recalls how his friends worked tirelessly to support him and pay his tuition fees. With tears, he then hugs Haruka and promises that he won't abandon him. Meanwhile, Mika discovers divorce papers at the house and learns that C has resigned from his job. A week goes by like this, and he doesn't show up, making her increasingly worried. One day, a crisis unfolds at the company as all of Sano's systems are hacked and all their data is compromised. Later, Mika discusses the situation with her grandfather, who suggests that C might be behind it. He believes that the bodyguard has hacked all their personal details for personal gain. Just then, C arrives with his friends. Haruka points a gun at Mika and claims they've come to get revenge on the Sanjo family. He rants about how their family has been exploiting vulnerable people over the years and tells them about what happened at the orphanage, including the death of Yuri. Hearing this, the chairman says he was unaware of the past incident at the orphanage. He reveals that once he entered their lives, he conducted a background check and found out that someone in their family had committed such heinous acts. He claims that he knew C was there for revenge, yet kept him close. Over time, he noticed C's genuine affection for Mika and believed him to be a worthy person. The old man pleads for forgiveness and begs them to spare his granddaughter. He states that if they want to seek revenge, they should take his life instead. With this, he takes out a sword and tries to hurt himself, but Mika stops him from doing so. During their scuffle, Haruka shoots at Mika, but C shields her and gets shot in the arm. He then begs Haruka to let this go, but Haruka doesn't listen and fires another shot at her. This time, C gets hit in the chest and loses consciousness. Seeing this, Mika is distraught and aims a gun at her head, deciding to kill herself. But before she can proceed, Ron intervenes and stops her. He reminds her that life is beautiful and one shouldn't throw it away so cheaply. Shortly after, an ambulance arrives and C is taken to the hospital. He manages to survive the bullet wound, but his demeanor towards Mika has completely changed. He refuses to speak to her, claiming all he wants is a divorce. With no other choice, she eventually signs the divorce papers. One day, C mysteriously disappears from the hospital. 6 months later, Mika succumbs to family pressure and marries Amani. However, she's very unhappy with him and doesn't like him at all. Whenever Amani tries to get closer, she brushes him away rudely. This makes him realize that she doesn't care about him, so he genuinely asks her to annul the marriage. A few days later, Mika receives news from the orphanage director that C has been staying there. She rushes to the location and learns that he has gone for a walk by the sea. Mika then heads there and eventually finds him. but he chooses to ignore her. Nonetheless, she doesn't give up and continues to follow him everywhere he goes. She claims that she loves him and wants to be with him forever, and that she can't even think about being with someone else. C responds by saying that everything is over, but she suddenly hugs him and they both fall to the ground. At this moment, he becomes emotional and finally admits that he still loves her. He was only trying to avoid her as he didn't want to risk her life anymore. Saying this, he kisses her passionately, and the two decide to get married again.